Welcome to In the Spotlight. I'm Abigail Pogrubin. Rabbi Irving Yitz Greenberg is a preeminent Jewish thinker, theologian, activist, and the president of the J.J. Greenberg Institute for the Advancement of Jewish Life. He is senior scholar in residence at Hadar. He attended Yeshiva Beis Yosef, where he was ordained, while attending Brooklyn College, where he received a BA degree in history. He later earned an MA and PhD in American history at Harvard. He served as the rabbi of the Riverdale Jewish Center, an associate professor of history at Yeshiva University, and a founder, chairman, and professor in the Department of Jewish Studies of the City College of New York. Rabbi Greenberg has written extensively about the Holocaust and about the historical and religious significance of the State of Israel, and he is a promoter of greater understanding between Judaism and Christianity. Yitz has written several books, including For the Sake of Heaven and Earth, The New Encounter Between Judaism and Christianity. His most recent book, which we are going to talk about today, is called The Triumph of Life, a Narrative Theology of Judaism. Welcome to the broadcast, Yitz. I'm so glad I get to call you Yitz because I've grown up with you in some ways, with your friendship, yours and Blue's with my parents. But now I'm the tough journalist talking about this brilliant book, The Triumph of Life, which really is, I know people keep calling it your magnum opus, but that's kind of an accurate term for 10 years of work.
Thank you. I hope so.
It's a beautiful, important book. I just want to start with people getting to know you a little bit, because as famous as you are, as legendary as you are, I think some people are actually discovering you for the first time, which is its own blessing. Just tell us how you grew up, a little bit of kind of your Jewish journey, and then particularly what was kind of a turning point in what you ended up focusing on as a leader.
Well, I grew up in an immigrant home. My parents came from Poland. My parents, this is in the 20s when no one knew what was coming. By the way, they tried to bring, in the 30s, they tried to bring their brothers and sisters. My mother had 4 brothers with families. My father had 2 sisters with families. They wouldn't come because they were set in Poland, and of course, none of them survived the Shoah, the Holocaust. So,
where did your parents go?
My parents came to America. My father first earned enough money to bring my mother and my older
Which city?
Sisters. From a place called Łomża in Poland.
But I mean, where here?
Oh, they came to New York. They started on the Lower East Side, ended up in Borough Park eventually. I was an ancient Borough Park, that's BC, before the Hasidim.
Before us.
It was a modern Orthodox community. I grew up in it. I loved it. My father was really a very significant scholar, although, and he communicated his love by learning with his children. So I was a very satisfied and fulfilled Orthodox Jew.
Wait, before we leave your satisfied, happy Orthodox childhood, what are you warming to so readily? What did you love about it? Do you remember?
Well, first of all, because it was taught to me by a loving parent. I give the parents. My mother was a natural religious person. I still remember every Friday night after she lit candles, she would have her conversation with God, and she would go through every one of her children and grandchildren, and she would tell God, this one has this problem, this one has this need, and she'd tell God. Well, it was a soft, she was talking soft, but you know, and she would tell God what to do and things like that. Anyway, so first of all, that communicates. I mean, when I prayed on the high holidays. When she prayed, you know, there were tears, there were real feelings. So she didn't talk much, but she communicated extremely the sense that God is here, God is present, God is someone you on your side. And your father, though, when you say he was a scholar, I discovered many years later he was an orphan. He was raised not in a family. He was raised, and his mother was so poor she sent him away to yeshiva where as a child because they fed you and they took care of you, and she couldn't. But so he grew up in what we now call misnagid, someone who, in the traditions of Lithuania, he didn't have social graces. He had no family life experience. He couldn't talk basketball or play with his kids, you know. But the one thing he knew was learning Talmud, and he loved it. So when he would want to communicate to his child, I really do love you, even though I don't know what to say, and he would take you and learn some Talmud with you. Well, let me tell you, it develops a rather positive attitude toward Talmud or toward learning when you realize that, you know, someone's making love to you with this text.
That's amazing. And then your education was what exactly?
Again, typical modern Orthodox. I went to elementary school in Borough Park, which was a modern Orthodox school. I went to Yeshiva University High School in Brooklyn. And then I was supposed to go to Yeshiva University. That was the standard path for the modern Orthodox Jew. By a lucky break, and I really was just pure luck, I stumbled into a yeshiva in Borough Park, which was a refugee yeshiva. It was half the people were survivors of the concentration camps, and the other half were survivors of Siberian labor camps.
Wow.
Because when they fled Poland, their home school was in Poland. They had when they fled the Nazis, they were lucky to flee the Nazis. The Russians betrayed them, and among other reasons, by sending them off to Siberia as if they were Nazi spies. And so they survived. Those that survived, they came together. It was an extraordinary experience for me because it confirmed, of course, Orthodoxy, because they were deeply religious. I mean, they'd gone through hell and came out of it with human and deep emotional commitments, and a sense of God is with them and protecting them. That was the great start. They also they were an offshoot of a 19th century movement in Orthodoxy to focus on character and development, that the religion is not just about rituals with God.
Is that Musar?
Musar, correct. And it's
about traits. It's about looking at your characteristics.
Working on your own character, developing positive traits, or developing responsibility, developing inner tranquility, to have trust in God and not be swayed by trends. It was a very emotionally fulfilling, a very extraordinary experience for me. And I mean, again, luckily, they were so fresh off the boat, they didn't speak English.
Wow.
But lucky for me, my parents spoke Yiddish at home, and I answered, and my siblings in English. But now, I couldn't even do that, so I really got to learn. But it was a great experience. Did you hold on
to your Yiddish?
It was really great. Yes, to this day. I mean, it was one of the blessings of that. But having said that, as I said, I was fulfilled. In fact, again, lucky break, I had no intention of being a rabbi. I was an immigrant child. I wanted to be all-American. That was my parents' dream. You know that, it's not a joke. My name is Yitzchak. I was named after a granduncle who eventually goes back to the patriarch, Yitzchak, Isaac. They never called me anything but Yitzchak. But when they came to the bris and they had to name me, they said, we can't do this to our son, stigmatize him as an immigrant child. He has to have an all-American WASP name. So they named me Irving. Irving, okay. Of course, every other Jewish mother named Irving, so the WASP dropped the name. But anyway.
So, but you weren't going to be a rabbi. So how did that change?
What happened was really, and this, because it was a traditional yeshiva and not Yeshiva University, you have to stop and take a 3-year degree at Yeshiva University. But with them, it was, if you studied the text and you passed the exams, you could do that in a regular sort of way and get the smicha. And I got it because I figured, why not? I had no real sense I would practice it. I wanted to be an academic. That was my dream.
And an academic doing what? Teaching what?
I got my PhD in American intellectual history at Harvard. And again, I went to Harvard only because that was, in those days, the acme of Americanism. That was, now you're ashamed of it. Okay, just joking. But so that was the background.
So wait, when you were at Brandeis and my mother met you, right, you were head of Hillel, am I right? I got that job because we got married and I had to do something to support my wife and child and myself. I had no children yet. But, that's why we took the Brandeis job. But I was planning to be an academic and working in that direction. In 1961, I got a Fulbright Award to be a visiting professor at Tel Aviv University in Israel. We had a strong Israel interest, we had a strong Zionist interest, we were thinking of Aliyah ourselves. So I got this job, but it was to teach American intellectual history. And after a month or so, we moved to Jerusalem, where all religious Jews want to live. A friend called me that week, we moved to Jerusalem, said, this is the end of the Eichmann trial, and the judges are about to start reading out the rulings, the final findings. Would you like to attend? No one can get tickets. I can get tickets. Like, you can go to the Eichmann trial? Now, believe me, as this shows, I said,
No, I can read about it in the papers.
Wow.
I'm an idiot, but okay.
Wow.
Anyway, and that's what happened.
And so when is this sudden shattering experience?
No, but then like 2 weeks later, out of left field, it sort of occurred to me, I have to know about this. I want to understand, I have to feel. And I started.
So wait, is that because of the Eichmann trial that sort of triggered?
Except I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not sure. To this day, there's some connection. But to make a long story short, it took over my life, and so the truth is, by the end, I was spending 5 days a week at Yad Vashem.
Wow.
Twice a week for 2 hours, I would take a car to Tel Aviv and teach American intellectual history and all the rest. It took over my life. First, it was devastating. I mean, for a religious, observant Jew, it was just devastating, the mass murder, the stuff, and the hardest, most painful truth, God did not neither stopped it nor seemed to intervene. So again, the truth is that in some days, the day before I read like a Treblinka, which was a pure killing place, and they would keep, and Rachel Auerbach, she's describing what it was like. She's a survivor. Very few survivors. She's a survivor. She describes like they stand there for hours, freezing cold. In many cases, they stripped them before they got in line, waiting on line to be put to death. And then the truth is, by the end, when you got close to the gas chambers, there wasn't always room. So she says, if the guard sort of had pity, the guard would take a child and knock him over the head, so they would be.
A guard would.
A guard would. But if they didn't have pity, and that was the regular way, they just push them into the burning pits. Or they no longer had no room in
that chamber.
Now, you read this, the next morning, I'm a good, observant, well-behaved Jew, so I get up in the morning, I put on my tefillin, I want to pray. I couldn't. You choked. Because again, it goes through your mind, and the moment when you see that burning child, or the moment you see the sheer degradation and destruction in that gas chamber, or for that matter in the ghetto, there's no God, or if there's a God, you don't feel it. You can't feel it anyway. So it was really a devastating experience. I had to come to grips with it. What do I do?
And where are you putting your devastation? Are you talking about it? Like, who are you telling?
No, so the honest answer is I was just dumbfounded, and I wrestling with myself, not know what to do. Of course, I talked to Blue about it a little bit, but you know what? Here's the paradox that saved me, really, looking back. First of all, our first child, Moshe, was just born. He was a little child. Now, here's the stunning experience. Every day I'm spending 8 hours reading about death and destruction and suffering and the children now dying and so on. And then I would walk out of Yad Vashem into the sunlight of Jerusalem. And it's right near Yar Yerushalayim, the forest of Jerusalem. And many times there are children in classes, and they're all down below, and you can hear them laughing, and they're running, and they're jumping, and they're happy. And then I would come home, and again, from month to month, little Moshe, he'd start to crawl, he started. On the way home, I'd remember and I'd see it. Jeremiah said, the day will come when you'll be back in Jerusalem and you'll hear the sound of the bride and the groom celebrating. And literally, that's what I heard. Or the prophet says, you'll see all these Jews coming back from all over the world, and they were walking the streets of Jerusalem. So it was like, really, it was like a bipolar experience. I mean, I would come home there for the whole day. I felt there's no God, there's no hope, there's no purpose, there's no value. And then by the time I got home, I'd say, there's life. The covenant, the Jewish promises are true, they're real, they're living in my lifetime and right in my face.
Wow.
And my child and my wife. So the truth is, for the first 20 years of wrestling, I mean, it took over. First of all, I changed my mind. I'm not going to be an academic. I want to be a rabbi or something that works for the Jewish people. I feel that I wanted to.
And I know, because we want to get to the book itself, but the book is very much kind of the culmination of a lot of this thinking.
So I wrestle with it, and I put it very simply, for 20 years, I had no answer or no explanation, no justification, other than saying, almost like bipolar. On Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, you know, God is real, the Torah is real, the covenant, the partnership of Jews and God to redeem the world is real. And on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, it's, you know, it's devastating. And they was like the Death Star and the Life Star fighting, and I couldn't get resolved. I had a close friend, Michael Wischergrad, who was a great philosopher. One day he says, look, he says, you can't believe in God on Tuesday and Thursday and doubt it on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I said to him, says you. I mean.
But what about on a serious note? It's when you have observant Jews, and you are one of them, say that that's not what faith is. Faith isn't wobbly like that, not wobbly, easily shaken like that.
Well, first of all, it's not easily shaken, it's powerfully shaken. That's number one. But more important, really, that's one of the things I came to see after a while, that true faith, particularly in our time, it's not simple. One of the things the book talks about is the stages of God's relationship with humanity. In the first stage, very visible, you couldn't have a question. I mean, if the sea splits in front of you, if a voice speaks from heaven, of course people...
I want to make sure people heard it's visible. In the beginning, God is very visible in this first stage of the three.
Correct. And very dominant, very controlling,
miracles.
Very trolling. And again, if you're not sure what to do, God will send you a message either by speaking from heaven or by a prophet. Yeah, and again, if you listen, it rains. And if you don't listen to God, drought, no rain. And yes, if you do the wrong thing, God will strike you dead.
If you're Aaron's sons and you offer the wrong fire.
Correct. Yeah. Now, but that is not the way the tradition or God developed. To me, that's part of the remarkable thing. And in wrestling with this question of God's intervention, I came to see that the rabbis already said, before the destruction of the temple, they said, God is self-limiting again. In the first stage of self-limit was to enter into a partnership. That is a limit. We're living with an infinite God, an all-powerful God, who says, I'm not going to transform the world totally without your participation.
Your humanity.
That's self-limitation.
We have a role to play.
It's one of the great Jewish teachings about God. God accepts limits in order to have humans be true partners in this process. But the rabbis said God made a second move to even more limit, meaning greater freedom, greater operation for the Jews, greater operation for humanity. And the outcome is based not, as in the first stage, on satisfying God. The outcome is based on human behavior, using good judgment, doing the right thing. A famous Talmudic passage that it's a transformation in which God no longer will speak from heaven. And the rabbis have an argument. A voice from heaven says, so-and-so is right, and the rabbis say, you should stay out of this. The
rabbis say that to God.
Right.
You should stay out of this and let us settle it.
The Torah is no longer in the heaven. I mean, now again, it's not because God is not available, but because now the rabbis teach God is hidden. By the way, this will satisfy our feminist audience. I hope we have one. The rabbis say that the macho, young warrior, powerful God who strikes down all the enemies represents in this second stage as Shekhinah. Shekhinah is God as a kind of maternal, feminine, kind, close. Now again, hidden. You don't see it. You don't see Red Seas don't split, and the Roman army was not drowned in the Mediterranean Sea. And that's why they lost. But it's a transformation of God's connection in a most powerful way because it's asking humans to step up and take more responsibility. And if you want to know what God wants, then unlike the good old days, Sammy Levinson, a comedian of my life, used to say when his father would say to him, and when I want your opinion, I'll give it to you.
I'll give it to you.
Now, so that's over. God doesn't give us the opinion. God says, you want to know my opinion? Use your judgment. Study the past records. Study the traditions. Study the Talmud.
So so God is standing by when humans make terrible decisions?
So it's not standing by. This is the hardest part of my argument, but I think it's critical. God, in the second stage, helps in terms of hidden miracles, participation in that way. I'll give you the example. In the first stage, it's Passover is the great liberation experience of Jewish people. And again, the Jews weren't ready to go out, so God sends them Moses. God's 10 plagues, drowns the Egyptian, and gets them out. In the second stage, God is hidden but closer and present. So that's the story of Purim. The story of Purim is you don't even see God's name in the book of Esther.
You have Esther and Mordecai.
But Mordecai and Esther take initiative, and God responds. How maybe he helps by keeping Achashverosh up one night to read the book, whatever. It's a second stage in which God is much more present, but much more hidden. And again, when I say present, I mean, the Talmud is magnificent. You want to feel the presence of Shekhinah. When you visit the sick, the Shekhinah is at the head of the bed. When you have hospitality and you bring guests in, when you sit at the table and you talk words of Torah, Shekhinah is present. When you go to your bedroom and you make love to each other, you do it right, with love, with relationship, with emotion, with connection, the Shekhinah is present. So
that's all second stage, basically.
All second stage.
It says that our participation and in some sense, divine presence is there.
It's there.
Because of the sort of, the holiness is in the act.
It's more there. It's more there, more places, but it takes more discernment. It's not visible. It takes discernment. They take the idea of a blessing.
And it takes agency and work.
The rabbis invented or expanded the idea of a blessing, because when I eat this fruit, I make a blessing. This is a fruit of the creation of God created the tree, God created the fruit. So suddenly an act that seems to be neutral, eating, turns into a presence of the divine. But you need some training and insight to see that.
Just want to say, at one point you write, this is a massive opportunity to increase holiness, you say. So what's the opportunity?
So here's the point. Now we're living at what I call the third stage. The third
stage, what's the third?
God is totally hidden.
Totally hidden.
But that means God is totally present. That means that many other places you never thought of is where you will meet God if you tune in, if you go deeper, if you think more deeply. Now, the book is all about what I consider to be the second most influential Jewish idea of all time. The most influential idea is God and belief in a universal creator. The second most influential idea...
Wait, let me make sure we heard that. The first big idea was what?
Everybody, you ask civilization, what did the Jews contribute to world civilization? Well, 90% will answer the belief in one God, the universal creator, monotheism. I'm focusing on this, what I consider the second most influential idea, which people don't appreciate as much. Don't accept the world as it is. Do not accept the status quo. Judaism, this is the messianic vision of Judaism. This world, flesh and blood, real world, can be and should be transformed into a paradise for life. And you know, it will be done. You have a partner, God will help you, but you have to play a major role. So we're talking about this, the Jewish religion. Unbelievable. It says you can overcome all the enemies of life. Poverty, it's an enemy. It destroys quality of life. Hunger, oppression, inequality, discrimination, these all should be overcome. Don't accept them as you can't fight City Hall. War, they'll beat the swords into plowshares, says Isaiah. Sickness, don't accept sickness. You can, Isaiah says in the Messianic age, the blind will see, the deaf will hear, the lame will dance. In short, this is the call of the third era, that when I say holiness, holiness is you will experience life in its most intense and deep level. God is the most intense form of life. But every area of activity is potentially such a place, because it can be a businessman, you'd say, well, that's neutral, or that's for profit. No, the answer is you can create pay that gives people dignity, working conditions that respects their dignity, a product that upgrades the world and doesn't pollute and doesn't destroy. In short, you pick the areas. Doctor,
but it's available to each of us to sort of,
correct,
to say in the granular, I can figure out how to combat or overcome hunger, sickness,
right,
war, inequality, poverty,
right,
in my own sphere.
Correct.
But it just seems like a very heavy lift, Yitz, that you're asking of people,
really,
because those problems are intractable and massive.
Well, that's the point.
And global.
That's Judaism's amazing contribution. It says, don't give in to the status quo. They look to be intractable. But in fact, you can make the difference. I must say, the modern culture, modern civilization, which attracted Jews tremendously, took that message. Modern civilization is all about the claim that if humans take power, they can overcome poverty, they can overcome inequality. That's what democracy has grown so much in the modern period. They can overcome sickness, and we've had amazing breakthroughs in medicine in the last 100 years. So the truth is that this is credible. What's gone wrong with modernity, in my judgment, is that when you lose the Jewish teaching that it's not you, not the master of the universe, you are not God, you are a partner. When you lose that partnership idea, you know what happens? When you increase wealth and industry, you pollute, you cause a global warming and a crisis in the environment, you destroy species. What Judaism can contribute now is to say, you're right to take power, but you have to frame it covenantally, with accountability to a higher power, with limits. That's what covenant's all about. Now, in a sense, this is the challenge of the modern period, that it is no longer a fantasy.
Where is God? Where is God for this third stage?
So the answer is God is everywhere. You have to open your eyes and open your ears and heart to experience that. That's number one. But I always tell people, the most likely place, look for the image of God. That's according to the Bible, that every human being is an image. We're God-like creatures. Now, God-like creatures means God is recruiting our talent, our brain, our creativity to
do what we can do.
Perfect His world, to repair His world, to overcome all those structural opposition. Having said that, you're not alone and you're not abandoned. What God does is not zap the cancer or miracle split the sea. What God does is to inspire, instruct, require, judge. It's a very important role to understand that we are not the ultimate authority. When the Nazis turned Hitler, the Führer, into the absolute authority, who shall live and who shall die, that's when it goes off the tracks and becomes the enemy of life itself. And that's been happening repeatedly in the last 200 years. Movements to perfect the world. Communism, what could be wrong? Maoism, he wanted to make women China equal to men. What could be a more valid thing? But
that's an abuse, that's a bastardization.
Without control, what happens is, okay, so anybody who resists me, kill him. So he kills 40 million peasants in order to bring a more equal society. So the Jewish answer is, you have to marry the two together. A utopian vision, a dream, don't settle. A utopian vision, a dream of universal equality, universal dignity, but marry that to a method that's much more respectful of people. That's what we call.
So let me just ask you, am I allowed to say your age on camera?
Yes.
So you're 91, right? You've seen the scourge of poverty, of hunger, of inequality for your whole life. I mean, where is the promise and the optimism of this vision?
No, because the answer is, in my lifetime, for example, at least 1 billion people have been taken out of poverty in the last 50 years. So the Jewish idea, which sounded really crackpot, you really want to change, there are 7 billion or 6 billion people in poverty. Well, now it's down to 2 or 3 billion living on $1 a day. Now again, it's a major challenge, but the Jewish answer was, don't accept that status quo. I'm telling you, you can totally transform the world. The difference is, the Mao Zedongs of this world, Khmer Rouge said, we're going to do it overnight, 100% jump, and anybody stands in the way will destroy. What the tradition said is, no, 1% at a time, incrementally, one step at a time. And you know what? If you do 1% a year for 100 years, you get 100%. And in this way, it's more human. Now again, there's a price. I don't deny that. The price is people stay in slavery longer, or in the case of the Jewish tradition, women did not get their full equality. They're still working on it. So there's a price you pay.
So the incremental approach requires patience. It
requires patience, and it requires steadfast, stubborn commitment. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm not going to settle.
There.
And in fact, it turns the covenant into a partnership, not just with God, but with fellow human beings, and with the next generation and the past generation. I take it as far as I can go. You know what? Where I started is thanks to those generations that went before me. I go as far as I can go, and this is important to listen. What was Mao Zedong saying when he said, I'm going to kill everybody who doesn't agree with me? He was saying, if I don't do it, no one will do it. All humanity, they're jerks, they're bad, they're reactionary. If I don't do it, it won't get done, so I'll kill anybody who stands in my way. What the tradition teaches is just the opposite. Have the respect. The next generation, maybe they'll do better than you. You have to have trust and love for human beings, that when they will see the same vision that you do, they will take it up. And again, I recognize what I'm saying. God giving us this kind of freedom, it can really be abused and lead to a tragedy. I mean, the Nazis used their freedom to exterminate the Jews and to kill hundreds of millions of people.
On October 7th.
And that's the same example with Hamas. There is freedom, and when humans use that freedom, how do they do it? Well, with Hamas, it's an expression of jihadi Islam, which again claims the right to kill anybody who stands in its way. And Hamas's charter says openly not just to wipe out the state of Israel, which would be a genocide of millions of people, it's kill every last Jew in the world. I mean, again, why? Because they're standing in the way. So this is my whole point. In a way, it is a risk. And I'll be frankly and say, sometimes democratic elections results really shake me and worry me. The bad guy's going to win. And again, in Israel right now, I'm certainly dissatisfied, as the majority of Israelis are, with the government in power, so that there's no question that there's a risk involved. But
the risk is involved in the freedom, in the sense that you're part of this, that you have agency in this.
Right.
You're saying that either the wrong people or the wrong goals.
The wrong goals or the wrong policy may lead that. But I look back and I say to myself, when I get nervous, I say, think of God's perspective. God had trust in human beings, giving him that much freedom that in the end, that the good guys or the goodwill or the better angels will win out over the evil angels.
Can I just ask, because you're positing God as if you have maintained your faith. What maybe it was on, I don't know which days. But would you say that God is good in this scenario of the third stage, that ultimately God is a force for good?
The Jewish tradition says that God is not only a force for good. That's one of the main arguments in the book. In the end, Moses summarizing the Torah, I place before you today life and good, death and evil, choose life. That's Moses' famous line. Maimonides pointed out, I read it 40, 50 years, didn't realize what it was we're reading. He said, look, what the Torah is really saying is that life and good go together, and it's life and good against death and evil go together. So you know what he says? It means that's the definition of good. It's a choice of life. Every good deed is a choice of life, or maximizing life as against some of the death that follows from it. Every evil deed, in some ways, a choice of death. If not literal, how about when I speak evil about somebody? I'm not killing them, I'm degrading them, I'm hurting them. But you know what? That's a choice of death too. It's a mini death, it's not a full death of the other person. So one of the main ideas I'm trying to say in the book is that the Jewish religion is not finished. It's still developing, but the main idea behind it was study every life action, eating, talking, working, loving, whatever. You can reshape it to make sure it maximize life and minimize death. And that's
the triumph of life, is the orientation.
It's an orientation in which live on the side of life is a good summary. Now again, it means, am I a good person? My answer is, did you leave behind more life when you left? That's a simple measure. You know what? For us to live, there is death. There's pollution from production. There's animals we eat in food. And by the way, my argument is that what the ritual of kashrut is trying to do is to say, ideally you should be vegetarian, because you shouldn't live by killing another higher organism. But if you do choose to eat meat, in the real world we understand there's value and there's proteins and so, then limit it. All the restrictions of kashrut are about limited to meat or organism. If you want to eat vegetables, all vegetables are kosher. All minerals are kosher. Now, that's the step one. But living the tradition, as I'm arguing, step two is, it's not just a question of limiting your eating. How about eco-kosher, not eating a species that may be kosher, but it's overfished and you don't want to destroy it? Or how about the workers, the farm migrant laborers, making sure that they are not poisoned by pesticide or oppressed, taking advantage of their pay, and so on and so forth. In other words, each of these actions can be much expanded. So halakha, so-called observance, is not just for Orthodox or observant Jews. It's taking every aspect of your life and reshaping it. I mentioned speaking before. I can speak a word of encouragement of life of potential, of inspiration. And I can speak the next word, degradation, stereotyping. What am I doing when I stereotype? I'm denying the dignity of human being. I'm saying you're just one of, and they're all, you name it. So
let me just interrupt you for a second, because I know you Yitz long enough to know that you're really living this way. I'm not saying you're perfect. I'm not saying you're tzaddik, though I think you are. But this is, first of all, asking a lot of people, particularly in a selfish world that is encouraging self-advancement and not so much this idea of like life-affirming actions for everyone, not just for yourself.
Right.
So first, let's just acknowledge, not that this is an entirely degraded, corrupt society. That's not what I'm saying. I hope most people have good instincts. But it sounds a little utopian, so I want to channel how people might be hearing the difficulty of this. And also, are you even seeing that this could really happen? Where someone is waking up and thinking about the food they eat and making that choice, and thinking about how they make love to the person they're with, and thinking about how that choice, and thinking about the person that they've employed. Like, do you really see this kind of catching fire as an orientation that changes the world?
Well, first I want to say again, that's what religion's about, if it's right, if it's not diseased or twisted. In other words, what the tradition offers is shortcut. You don't have time to study all the eating options, well, here's a guide. Mm-hmm. You don't have time to study all the speaking or working options, here's a guide. Now again, let's be honest, it helps, but it's not a guarantee, including in our lifetime, as we know and do new things, there are possibilities the tradition didn't get to. My wife has been really a very important role playing to show that women in the tradition can be more equal, can be more full, can be leaders.
She is a hero.
Can be leaders and so on, and I think that is one of the goals. So I'm not offering the tradition as a quick answer. I'm saying here's a tremendous resource, but in the end, you'll have to make your choices. Now, am I over-optimistic? I don't think so, because I'm not saying we're all going to do the right thing. I'm saying do 1% better. And I do think the reality of the last several hundred years is that the idea of everybody equal, it's spread much more rapidly and much more widely than ever before. It doesn't mean that the majority of the world is yet living in a democracy. I say the same holds true, overcoming poverty. We haven't overcome all poverty, but in major breakthroughs, that's exactly what I'm saying. These ideas are no longer off the wall. They are credible. The real responsibility, of course, is carrying them out. And again, maybe I'm optimistic, and I realize the bad guys might win. I don't deny that. Democracy can lead, as we're seeing all over the world today, it can be turned into populist authoritarianism. I understand the danger. But again, I argue we should imitate God, and that's what the tradition is about. It's trying to recruit people to live this way.
Can you, I know you're comfortable because we've talked about it and you've talked about it publicly, the loss of your son, JJ. The idea that that can happen in a faithful life, it's just hard for people, it's hard for me to absorb that. You kind of did everything right. I know that's simplistic. In terms of prayer, in terms of observance, in terms of prioritizing life in everything you do, and this tragedy can happen. So how, just in terms of your book's ideas? So
you have to liberate yourself from what I understand has been a very powerful and widespread tradition. The belief that the world is structured so that if I do the right thing or pleases God, I will get reward.
It's a quid pro quo.
So if I get cancer, what did I do wrong? That's what people say. But I think the deeper truth of covenant says, and by the way, it was in the Genesis a couple of weeks ago, God says after the flood, I'll never do the flood again. From now on, natural law will rule. So you live in a world, a natural world, so when a bad guy falls off the mountain or a good guy falls off the mountain, they fall at the same rate of gravity, and in the end, well, I would like it to be that if I'm a good guy, I will be guaranteed and my children will not die, and so on. But what the Bible is saying is the opposite. A world of natural law means that you have freedom and you have responsibility. If you lived in a world where the minute you do the wrong thing, a thunderbolt strikes you, well, we could get a bunch of, Pavlovian dogs trained, but in a way, the tradition is trying to say that's not what it's about. A human being in the full dignity is a person with freedom and agency and self-choice and full rights to access and to try. That's the goal, that's the dream. And such a person can develop a mature relationship to God. I think this third stage is the most mature, because we're not doing it for the reward and punishment. And we're doing it, and we're not doing it because we're so awed by splitting the Red Sea, I'll do anything you say. We're doing it
fear.
Because we've come to understand in the third stage where God is with us all the way, and what inspires us to do it is a relationship. It's to know that we're loved. If people ask me, what's the meaning of being a chosen people? My answer is, it means that God loves me. What is the meaning? The Bible says that human beings are in the image of God. It means that they are loved, and because they're loved, and in this case everybody's loved, they are infinitely valuable. They're unique. No one can replace them. Now, once you understand that is the reality of the experience, you can draw upon it, and the goal of religion is to help you expand it. There is, just as I feel loved, I can turn around. By the way, when I say I feel loved, my point is the Jewish people is a chosen people because they experience God's love. What I discovered in meeting the rest of the world, particularly when I got involved with interreligious dialogue after the Holocaust, is that God is a God of multiple choice. That God has enough love to love Christians and not just Jews, enough love to love Buddhists and not just Jews, and so on. And so it's not that we were wrong, it's knowing the limits of we are infinitely loved, we have a relationship with God. It's a wonderful bunch, but we're not the only ones.
We're not the only ones, but Yitz, I want to push you on people who don't feel loved when what feels unfair happens. And I know you're talking about prayer should not be an exchange, essentially. Right. Like, you know, you do this and you get that. But there is a sense of God being good, as you said, and wanting the right outcome. So just squaring that, it may be just like a pediatric stubbornness that I'm having.
No, it's not pediatric stuff. Obviously, and there are days now where I still wake up and say, I understand the Holocaust happened because God wanted humans to do it and they didn't do it. I understand that. But
and
still,
October 7th,
there are some days I get up and I say, I'm furious. Why didn't you go back to the bad old days and stop and you say, the same thing with October 7th. Those are terrible. They really shake us. But the goal, it's not about me, you know. That's one of the great themes of the book of Job. He goes through all this incredible suffering, loses his children, loses his wealth, loses his family, his health. But people tell him, you know, curse God and die. He refuses to do that, but he says, I'm not guilty, and I'm not going to accept the claim that I'm being punished for my sins. At the end, God speaks. And God does not directly answer his question, but he describes creation. And suddenly I think Job realizes it's not about him. Yes, the natural law, and it makes for a world that could be a paradise. It makes for a world in which a lot of great things can be done. Yes, that in the end the natural law operated. So when my child was struck by a driver who ran the light, it caused brain bleeding, and they couldn't save him. So, of course, it's extremely painful, and I wish. I tell people, you know what happened? We got a call from Israel. He was in Israel at the time. And morning, I was a rabbi. I wasn't planning to go to this morning services, but I got the call. I jumped out of bed, and by the way, I already was writing all these things that we don't do it, and it's not a deal, that's not transactional. I jumped out of bed, I ran to shul, and I said a Mishaberach, a blessing, you know, God save them. I knew that that's not what I believed anymore, but it's so emotionally needy. But what Job realizes is the magnificence of this world, the scope, the natural order, the miracle of every system operating in a human being. That's the truth of existence, and what you can do and should do. Embrace it, go deeper into it, and you will find the meaning and the purpose. The fact that you have this personal setback, terrible, disastrous, and so we lost a daughter-in-law to cancer. These things happen, but the answer is try to see it from a broader perspective. In the end, it's really not about you. It's about the total picture and the total people, and I still believe that that is possible. And of course it shakes you, and yes, you know, Isaiah agrees with you, by the way. Isaiah said the day will come, the Messianic day, right? There will be no evil, there will be no suffering, no sickness. He said, then people will know God. Everybody will know God. He said, right now, he gives this analogy, it's like seeing God through a screen, because we say we believe in God, the believers do, but when you see evil, when you see innocent suffering, when you see tragedy, it's like a screen, it blocks the view. Well, so I'm saying again, I think you can rise above that, and I'll add one more comment, which I think, when I tried in the end to eulogize JJ, one thing I said at the end is, look, I hope you'll have a child, you'll be blessed with such a child that had, he was kind, he was good, he was goofy, he was funny, he was energetic, he was rebellious, and as a teenager. I hope you'll have a child that will give you such fulfillment and such joy that if they tell you, when you pick up the child, they tell you should know that it's going to end, and it's tragic, and you're going to be heartbroken, and you're going to really miss him terribly. You would say, I'll take it. You'll take it, I'll take it. And I still believe that strongly. So again, that's part of it. In other words, I say, even if life gives us terrible, terrible setbacks, there is so much joy, there's so much potential, so much fulfillment in a life, that I think the answer is I'll take it. And I think that's, again, that's one of the Jewish messages.
It's amazing.
Of course, don't get me wrong. Part of it is you should be investing, you should become a doctor, or your grandchild should become a doctor that will figure out how to stop cranial bleeding. You should, don't accept any of these evils. Join or work with or find common ground with other people who do it. And again, you don't have to be a goody-goody. I say again, businessmen out for profit, self-centered, but if you can create a product that really improves the world and doesn't pollute, if you can make jobs that give dignity and capacity, then you're a major religious contribution. It doesn't have to be just, over your own capacity. And I say this to everybody. I think one of the greatness about Jewish religion is it says human beings. Read the Bible. The greatest figures in the Bible, they had flaws, they had serious problems, some of them acted wrongly. We're not trying to tell you you have to be an angel. We're trying to tell you you can be the best person you can be, and we'll give you guidance, we'll give you inspiration, we'll give you help, but in the end, you're going to have to choose.
You say that in our time, Jewish parents knowingly put their children at risk, binding them for life. That basically every choosing Jew is committed to share Jewish faith. Can you explain? I know it's a different idea than what you were talking about in terms of JJ, but it's...
No, thank you for saying that. I think that's one of the great truths we all, particularly after the Holocaust, and again, we've for a while fooled ourselves, but October 7th, it brings it right back to the center of the stage. What the Holocaust said was, being Jewish, which means you're a witness to perfecting the world, you're working for improving life for everybody, you're teaching people about a loving God, your reward is a lot of people out there to kill you. It's very shocking, it's very disturbing, and again, it's worth another conversation, but I think anti-Semitism comes from people who become so absolute in what they think they believe in, that anybody who differs from them, they're ready to kill. That's what the Nazis taught us. Humans are all powerful, so if you tell me, Jews tell me, by their existence, that we're not all powerful, there is a God, you know what? So I want to wipe them out. So if you can overcome that fear, not overcome the fear, you have that fear. If you have the courage, and I say every Jew today of any style, type, has made a choice. We're all Jews by choice, because you know that you are endangered. You know that your children or grandchildren, we're wrestling with this the past year in Israel, we're living in Israel, to see how the parents of the children, we all visit the Shiva, who died in the battle, they understand, and they said, this is my country, I'm not going anywhere else. And I understand now, after October 7th, that means my child may be bound to the altar, that my child or grandchild maybe have risk, and God forbid even be killed, but I'm prepared to pay that price. So I say this is the most heroic age of the Jewish people.
And you have a personal, obviously, investment yourself. You're living in Israel, you have...
Well, I'll tell you, our youngest daughter...
Grandchildren?
Our youngest daughter has 5 children. So, first of all, all five have served in the Army. The number one son served in Navy SEALs, which is highly dangerous. Number two served in Special Ops, which again is dangerous. Number three is in the Air Force. Number four is a daughter. She served as a specialist in drones. And the fifth, right now, as we speak, is in Lebanon. He's a tank gunner.
My goodness.
Again, I didn't know. I said, in general, she's a hero beyond heroes. I don't know how she could live with that, and I live with it.
You mean your daughter?
Yeah, yes. Now, in fact, the number two son in a special ops trying to save hostages in Gaza last December was badly wounded. Badly wounded, I mean, to the point the doctor said to us afterward, 50 years ago he would have died on the way to the hospital. But they've developed all kinds of ways of stopping bleeding. And he said 20 years ago he would have lost his legs because they were badly injured by the wounded and so on. Now they think they can save those legs now. So it's a very risky thing, but again, I say again, it's as powerful and as fierce and as dangerous as death is. The Jewish religion says love and love of life is stronger. In the Song of Songs it says love is as fierce as death. And that's why it can overcome. Now, by the way, I learned that in the hard way in terms of JJ. You realize that love survives sometimes even when you lose them. But more important is when you have them. And that, I feel, is her secret. I'd say everybody, it's the heroic age. Not only that, because, by the way, this is, again, the main message of the book. And the third stage, like modernity, the message is humans take power for life. Because right now, if you don't take power for life, there are evil people who will take power for death. So you have to take power for life. There's no choice, which means if you take it, you have the risks and difficulty. Now, this is the heroic age of the Jewish people. A, they choose to be Jewish. B, when they realize in order to do that, they have to take up the power and the risks of power and the deaths and the suffering of power. They did that, and perhaps most important, exercise that power for life, which means with restraint, with morality. And again, people are trying to argue the opposite. But the truth is, to this day, Israel makes more effort than any army in history to minimize civilian casualties. So again, it's heartbreaking, it's devastating that so many civilian Palestinians have died. But that's because Hamas has placed its soldiers and its army right in them as human shields. And I think one should stop and appreciate that Israel, by major efforts, has in fact kept civilian casualties down to a very low ratio. Okay. So again, I'm not justifying the pain and the suffering is real, but the reality is the other way, that it's exercising powerful life. So I consider this the heroic age on every level. Those Jews who choose to live as Jewish, those Jews who, to my shock, after the Holocaust came closer. You know, the evidence is that some 25,000 French Jews after the war took out false papers, went to places where they could escape being Jewish because they didn't want to live through it again. But for those 25,000, the vast majority did the opposite. And to this day, it amazes me, Jews who read about the Holocaust, they become more Jewish, they become more involved.
Well, even post-October 7th, we've seen such an upsurge in conversions.
Again, upsurge in conversions, people stepping forward.
Yeah.
I fully acknowledge that there is a greater danger and a greater risk, but this heroic age, and to me, that's what the book is about also, inviting people to embrace life and to say that it's our privilege to be in that age when we really can make major breakthroughs for life.
Incredible. My last question is, you say there are more miracles in our lifetime than in history. And I want to know what you mean by that. Well,
first of all, what the rabbis taught me is that the miracle is not splitting the Red Sea. The miracle is the sea, the natural law. The miracle is the digestive system, the brain system, the muscular system. They work amazingly well. And again, there are cancer and there are failures, but amazingly for most people. So number one is, they said, famous prayer, we thank you, God, for your miracles which are every day, morning, afternoon, and evening. What's the morning miracle? It was a special blessing. When you move your bowels, it's a miracle. You think of all the systems that had to work to make that possible, and it keeps you healthy. But in the third stage, I'm saying it's a much broader. Miracles simply means humans using natural law, operating as agents of God, make miracles. I'll give you a personal miracle, right? How about the iPhone? I mean that seriously. I was talking here, and 7,000 miles away, my wife or my grandchild hears me and they answer back. That's miraculous. I could go through 1,000 miracles. How about the medical cancer treatment that put my lymphoma into remission? That chemical, it's a miracle. And again, it was not by violating natural law, but by discovering these powers. We're living through an age in which human beings decoded the code of life, DNA. That means they used their godlike brain. They didn't invent DNA, that maybe that's too complicated, or rather, that's what God has done, a universal code. But they decoded it, and now you can use that code to correct genetic malfunctions. That's the partnership. God is asking us to improve even on the good world that God made. So from my point of view, there are more miracles every day, literally, around us. Many of them we take them for granted, but it seems to me, if you open your eyes, and maybe that's an important part of being a religious person, is to open your eyes and see that literally, the breath you take, the system of oxygen, and not polluted oxygen that enables me to breathe, all those are daily miracles that we experience.
Thank you. Rabbi Irving Yitz Greenberg, this is such an important book and such an achievement, and it's not so long, so people shouldn't be, even though they're calling it your magnum opus, and it is navigable and it's beautiful, and it's called The Triumph of Life, a narrative theology of Judaism. Thank you for being here from your home in Jerusalem. It's such an honor to be with you after all these years.
Thank you so much.
I'm Abigail Pogrobin for In the Spotlight. I will see you next time. Thanks for being with us.